Hello and thanks for joining us for our late night newscast coming to you from Arirang's news centre in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom. The world's reaction to North Korea's latest provocations is our starting point tonight. Concerned with the regime's rapid firing of multiple ballistic missiles over the past couple of weeks, the UN Security Council has been working on a suitable response. It also wants to check on how strictly member nations are enforcing the current sanctions on North Korea. Lee Ji-won starts us off.
The UN Security Council convened on Friday to discuss ways to strengthen the enforcement of sanctions on North Korea after the regime attempted to test-fire 3 mid-range ballistic missiles in the space of 2 weeks. According to AFP, the draft statement requests all UN member countries to submit a report on the concrete measures they have taken to impose sanctions on North Korea by May 31st. The statement also directs the UN Sanctions Committee to intensify its work in enforcing the current sanctions resolution on North Korea, which was implemented in March after Pyongyang's 4th nuclear test and long-range missile launch. The latest sanctions, which are the toughest to date, attempt to make it difficult for the North to raise funds to further develop its nuclear and missile programs, including ban on mineral exports from North Korea, the inspection of cargo, and more. The U.S. and China have agreed on the latest statement, but Russia has requested more time to consider it, delaying the adoption to later this weekend or next week. Meanwhile, South Korea's defense ministry said Friday that North Korea's recent missile launches won't be Pyongyang's last, given that the regime dared to test 2 more Musudan missiles after its previous failure. And with its first ruling Workers' Party Congress in 3.5 decades slated for Friday, Seoul believes North Korea wants to stack up some military accomplishments to cement the power base around Kim Jong-un. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, North Korea is thought to be preparing to reprocess spent nuclear fuel to get more plutonium for nuclear weapons. Citing satellite imagery taken of the North's main nuclear complex earlier this week, the US-based Institute for Science and International Security said North Korea was renovating its nuclear waste disposal facilities, possibly in anticipation of additional plutonium separation activities. The Yongbyon complex has been a focus of attention since US Intelligence Chief James Clapper said in February that the North had restarted its main nuclear reactor and has since run it for long enough to harvest plutonium for nuclear bombs. The reactor provided North Korea with the weapons-grade plutonium the regime used in its first 3 nuclear tests in 2006, 2009 and 2013. US forces in Korea have a new commander. General Vincent Brooks had his inauguration earlier today, and as the two allies wrapped up their annual joint military exercises. Connie Kim with the details.
In the face of growing threats of North Korea, Vincent Brooks, the new commander of U.S. Forces Korea, emphasized the increasingly strong alliance between Seoul and Washington during his inauguration ceremony on Saturday.
In the present day, the challenges continue to rise, but so also do the strength of the alliance and the resolve of the United Nations. And I will ensure that we are always ready to fight tonight.
Brooks replaces General Curtis Scaparotti, who had been the USFK commander since 2013. The new commander's inauguration came on the same day as the official ending of the annual South Korea-U.S. joint military drills. The 2-month exercise that started in March was the largest ever, coming after North Korea's nuclear and long-range missile tests early this year. Some 300,000 South Korean troops and 17,000 American troops took part along with key U.S. strategic weaponry. 2 U.S. amphibious assault ships were deployed to South Korea at the same time, and an operational plan that preemptively strikes key North Korean facilities was carried out for the first time. North Korea on Saturday slammed the exercises as the worst military provocation that led to the brink of war. In a statement released by its foreign ministry, North Korea warned its nuclear attack capabilities advance every time its enemies launch a nuclear war practice. The North calls the joint drills a rehearsal for war, but Seoul and Washington insist they're purely defensive in nature. Although the exercises have come to an end, tension on the Korean peninsula remains high, as North Korea is speculated to conduct its 5th nuclear test ahead of its ruling Workers' Party Congress next week. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, Iran's media has been bubbling with excitement ahead of President Park Geunhye's state visit to the country, which starts on Sunday. The country's state-run news agency, Islamic Republic News Agency, reported Saturday that the visit marks the first by a South Korean leader since the two countries established diplomatic ties 54 years ago. It said Iran will be a great economic partner as Korea is in need of a new market with great potential to revitalize its economy. Another local newspaper said that with President Park's visit, the two countries will sign business contracts worth up to $17 billion. The industries include natural gas, oil, health and more. President Park is set to depart on Sunday morning Korea time. Now, Korea's finance ministry says the country's foreign exchange policies will remain the same despite the US move to put Seoul on its so-called monitoring list. Finance Minister Yoo Il-ho says that as Korea avoided the manipulator designation, it is business as normal for the nation's foreign exchange policies. In a report released on Friday local time, the US Treasury Department said that during the second half of last year through March this year, Korean authorities intervened to resist depreciation of the won during periods of financial market turbulence. China, Japan, Taiwan and Germany were also placed on the department's monitoring list for their respective foreign exchange policies. The UN Commission for the Asia-Pacific region recently held a panel session in the western port city of Incheon to discuss how Korea can overcome its labour market troubles and boost productivity. Oh Soo-young reports.
Koreans are some of the most overworked employees in the world, as well as some of the most underpaid, according to the OECD. Its report suggests this may be why the country has such low productivity, especially in the service sector, which has the lowest productivity among OECD countries. Manufacturing productivity has slowed, its index hitting 99.4% last year, down by almost 3 points from 2011. Korea's productivity decline comes as part of a regional trend. On Friday, the UN's Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific launched its flagship report. It shows a collective fall in annual productivity growth to below 1% in recent years. This drop accounted for almost a fifth of the region's economic slowdown in the last decade. To revive economic growth, the report prescribed policy recommendations, primarily on boosting domestic consumption and real income by improving labour productivity.
You need to develop capacity, you need to develop workforce that is able to cope with the new challenges in the society, and then you need to increase the ability of the countries to cope with the problems that it has.
To discuss the applicability of these measures in Korea, a panel discussion was held in Incheon.
In order to boost domestic consumption, I think there's a lot of things that the government is trying to do, but because companies are not able to or not willing to invest in their reinvestment, growing their companies, hiring more people, it has created a lull in the economy, and we really need a very innovative, creative break in order to break out of this lull.
Experts also addressed the need to balance out uneven concentrations of wage and human capital riddling the labour market.
Young workers avoid jobs in currently unproductive industries like service and manufacturing and turn to established conglomerates due to huge wage discrepancies. We need to foster work environments that properly compensate workers and allow them to grow.
The UN Commission says higher productivity goes beyond economic gain to benefit society as a whole. It serves as a positive step towards achieving the UN's Sustainable Development Goals by the year 2030. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Now, more Japanese and Chinese tourists are expected to come to Korea this week as both countries have extended public holidays. Officials say China has a 3-day weekend thanks to Labor Day celebrations. Japan is currently on its 10-day-long Golden Week holiday. So to prepare for the uptick in tourists from those countries, Korea's main gateway, Incheon International Airport, has increased the number of immigration counters to shorten waiting times and open check-in counters 30 minutes earlier than normal. More staff have also been brought in to help in duty-free stores. Now, last year, 100,000 Chinese tourists visited Korea during the Labor Day public holiday. 73,000 Japanese tourists came during the Golden Week. Now, in technology news, virtual reality has gone beyond gaming and is now being used in many industries for various capacities, from architecture to tourism. More and more uses of the technology are surfacing. Park Se-young has the details.
In this virtual reality tour program, tourists step off the plane, arrive at a hotel, and experience scuba diving among the coral reefs. This virtual reality architecture demo allows us to explore every corner of this realistic home, open its doors, and even turn on the lights. According to experts, virtual reality is expected to transform the way architects work. More industries in Korea are working to integrate virtual reality into their businesses. By wearing VR glasses, one can instantly travel to an overseas warehouse. People can not only check stock levels at remote facilities, but will be able to conduct meetings in virtual space, overcoming the limits of space and time. The Ministry of Science, ICT, and Future Planning predicts the global VR market to grow from an estimated $4 billion this year to $50 billion in 2020. Korea has earmarked $155 million in state funds over the next 3 years to support the development of its own VR industry. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Now, finally, we're going to leave you with a brief look at the weather for the weekend. Most of the country is under partly cloudy skies tonight. We are going to see the overnight low dip to 12 degrees Celsius tonight in the Korean capital. Sunday will be warm and sunny with the highs topping out in the mid to high 20s in most parts of the country. With that, let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, those are the stories we have for you at this hour. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out the website, arirang.com/news. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Goodbye.